Your Honor, the state would next present Detective Andrew Harasimchuk of the Cleveland Police Department Sex Crimes Unit. He will be presented by Assistant Prosecutor Max Mark.
Thank you. Good morning, Detective.
Sir.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Will you please identify yourself for the court?
Yeah, Detective Andrew Harasimchuk, Harasimchuk, badge number 481. Work for the City of Cleveland, Division of Police, Sex Crimes, Child Abuse Unit.
You are a detective?
That's correct.
Were you working in that capacity on May 6th of 2013?
Yes, I was.
And in fact, did you later become the lead Cleveland Police Department investigator of this case?
But yes, I did.
All right. Can you tell us how you became involved in this case?
Yes. On May 6th of 2013, I was in the office of the Sex Crimes, Child Abuse Unit when I received a phone call from Sergeant Coleman, who requested assistance from Sex Crimes, Child Abuse Unit detectives at Metro Health Medical Center in the location of 2207 Seymour Avenue in connection with the recovery of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus.
What did you do when you got that call?
Myself and Detective Carl Lessman responded to 2207 Seymour Avenue. Once there, we spoke with FBI Special Agent Andrew Burke and Cleveland Police Department Deputy Chief Chamba. Deputy Chief Chamba directed myself and Detective Lessman to head over to Metro Hospital to interview the victims.
Did you go to Metro?
Yes, we did.
And what did you do when you got there?
Once at Metro Health Hospital, it was myself, Detective Laura Parker, and Detective Cynthia Adkins. We then conducted the initial interviews of the victims.
And which victims are you speaking of at this point?
Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus.
What were those victim interviews like?
They were very brief. It was a very chaotic setting at the time in the hospital.
What was chaotic about it?
There's multiple people present in the room, and hospital staff and other personnel coming in and out of the room at the time.
This is just hours after their escape?
That's correct.
Did you interview Michelle Knight?
Yes, I did.
And what did you learn from your interviews of Michelle Knight?
During the initial interview with Michelle Knight, who was 21 years old at the time she was taken, stated that on August 22nd of 2002, she was walking in an attempt to find this social worker that was in charge of her son, because she wanted to speak with him. She was lost and she was in a store, and she was starting to ask people for directions, at which time Ariel Castro approached her and said he knew where she was looking for and offered to help her. Michelle Knight knew Ariel Castro because she's friends with his daughter, Emily Castro, so she accepted the ride.
Did Michelle relate to what took place after she got in Ariel Castro's car?
Yes. They began driving and they arrived at Ariel Castro's home. He asked her if she wanted to come inside to get a puppy for her son. So she agreed to go in to pick out a puppy for her son. Once inside the home, she did not see a puppy. She did see a dog, but there were no puppies. At this time, she is physically restrained by Ariel Castro with an extension cord. She's left that way for several hours. When Ariel Castro returns, he takes her down to the basement where she's physically restrained with a chain. Plastic ties are put on her wrists, and a motorcycle helmet is placed on her head. At this time, she is sexually assaulted. Michelle Knight was left alone, physically restrained in the dark basement overnight. During this interview, Michelle Knight described a pattern of being repeatedly sexually, physically, and emotionally abused by Ariel Castro during her entire time of captivity.
So during this interview, you're learning about the initial abduction as well as the crimes that were committed against her throughout her captivity?
That's correct.
And she was able to identify Ariel Castro as the perpetrator of those crimes?
That's correct.
What else did she tell you?
During a subsequent, she stated that on the night they were rescued on May 6, 2013, when the patrol officers entered the house, she heard loud noises, and she began to panic. She said that she heard someone yelling, "Police, police, police," and the next thing she knew, she had been rescued by the police.
All right, did you have an opportunity to interview her subsequent to that initial interview that you conducted on May 6th?
Yes, I did.
What did you learn from any subsequent interview of Ms. Knight?
During subsequent interviews, Michelle Knight relayed that she had been pregnant on several occasions in the house, and she knew this because she felt the same way that she was when she was pregnant with her son. She also relayed that Ariel Castro terminated her pregnancies. This was done by starving her, feeding her rotten food, kicking and punching her in the stomach, jumping up and down on her in the stomach, and forcing her to perform physical exercises.
And the results of that torture?
It resulted in the termination of her pregnancies.
Did she also relate to you that he kicked her down the stairs in an effort to terminate those pregnancies?
Yes, she did.
Now, did you have occasion to interview Amanda Berry on May 6th?
Yes, I did.
And what were you able to learn through that interview?
During the initial interview with Amanda Berry, who was 16 years old at the time she was taken by Ariel Castro, stated that on April 21st of 2003, she had just gotten off work at Burger King and was walking home when a van drove by her, which had a female in it that she thought she knew, so she smiled. She continued walking. A short time later, that same van approached her, and the male in the van asked her if she wanted a ride. She accepted it because she thought she knew the female in the van. She got in the van. She realized that this female was no longer in there. She'd just gotten off of work at Burger King, so she was wearing her Burger King uniform. Ariel Castro asked her if she knew his son, who had worked at Burger King, and she said that she did. He then went on to ask if Amanda Berry knew his daughter Angie, and she did know his daughter Angie Castro. So they began driving, and Ariel Castro asked her if he wanted to go see Angie, who was at his home. So they went to Ariel Castro's home. But once they got there, he told her to come on inside the house so she could talk to Angie.
Was she there when Ms. Berry got inside the home?
Ariel Castro told her that she was in the home taking a bath. So he began showing Amanda Berry around the house. As they went upstairs, there was a closed door, and she was able to look through a hole where the doorknob used to be, and the door and saw a female who she later learned to be Michelle Knight was in that room. At that time, Ariel Castro told her that that was his roommate. Once they were upstairs in the upstairs bedroom, Amanda Berry told Ariel Castro to please take her home, or she would call the police. At this time, she attempted to run out of the room, but it was dark in the room, and she became disoriented and ran into a closet. It was at this time that Ariel Castro first sexually assaulted her. He then used duct tape to tie her wrists, her legs, put duct tape on her mouth, and a motorcycle helmet on her head. He then carried her down in the basement, where he physically restrained her with a chain, where he left her overnight alone in the dark basement.
What was she chained to?
She was chained to the center pole of the basement, the center support pole. During this interview, Amanda also said that she had given birth to her daughter there, and that birth was assisted by Michelle Knight. She said that during her pregnancy, she received no pre- or postnatal medical care or any medical care whatsoever.
Did she describe the treatment that she received, this type of assaults that she received during her period of captivity?
She did.
What did she tell you?
She also described a repeated pattern of being sexually, physically, and emotionally assaulted by Ariel Castro during her entire time of captivity.
Did she tell you about her escape?
She did.
What did she tell you?
She stated that on the day she escaped, she was terrified. She was attempting to open the door. She was afraid that Ariel Castro would return. She was able to open the main door to the home, and then the storm door, the screen door, was locked and she couldn't open it. She began banging on the glass and calling for help. At this time, a man and a woman from across the street came into Ariel Castro's yard, and while they're in the yard, a man from next door also came over and was up on the porch and began telling Amanda to kick out the bottom panel of the door. After several kicks to the door panel, she was able to get the door panel open, and then she crawled out through the door panel with her daughter.
Very good. Now, did you have an opportunity to interview Georgina De Jesus on May 6, 2013?
Yes.
What did you learn from that interview?
During the initial interview with Georgina De Jesus, who was 14 years old at the time she was taken, stated that on April 2nd, 2004, she was walking home from school with her friend, Rosie or Ariel Castro.
And who's that?
That is Ariel Castro's daughter.
What happened while they were walking home?
They wanted to see if Rosie was able to go over to Gina De Jesus' house, so they stopped at a payphone to make a phone call. They called Rosie's mother and asked if she would be able to come over to Gina's house. She was not allowed to, so the two girls walked home in their separate directions.
What happened to her next?
As she was walking home, she was approached by Ariel Castro, and he asked her if he could help her locate his daughter. And she assumed that he was referring to Rosie, who she had just left, so she said that yes, he could help her. So she got in the van, and they started driving. They turned somewhere where she didn't think they should turn. At this point, Ariel Castro tells her that he has to go home to get some money. So they go to his house. Once at his house, he asked Georgina De Jesus if she could come in the house and help him carry out a speaker and put it in the car. So she agrees to do that.
What happened when she went into the house?
Once she was inside the house, she became uncomfortable and she wanted to leave. Ariel Castro told her that she had to exit the home from a different door that she came in, so they went out a different door and she wound up in the basement. At this time, Ariel Castro physically restrained her with a chain that was attached to the center support pole, the basement, put plastic ties on her wrists. It was at this time that Gina De Jesus was first sexually assaulted. During this interview, Georgina De Jesus described a repeated pattern being sexually, physically, and emotionally assaulted by Ariel Castro during the entire time she was held captive.
Did she tell you about the escape on May 2nd?
She did. She said on May 6, 2013, when they escaped, she heard Jocelyn Berry running up and down the stairs, saying, Daddy left, went to Grandma's house. She states that she was just going to lay still and not do anything because she was afraid it could be a trap and that Ariel Castro could be outside waiting for them.
So now you've wrapped up your interviews at Metro. You've got a snapshot of the incredible story of survival, right?
Yes.
And how do you continue your investigation? What do you do?
I interviewed Ariel Castro. I visited the crime scene. I read dozens of reports that were completed by various law enforcement agencies. I examined hundreds of photographs. I reviewed hundreds of pieces of physical evidence that were taken from the house. I conducted follow-up interviews with the victims. I reviewed written materials kept by the victims during their years of captivity. I consulted with the prosecutor's office.
And what did your investigation reveal? All of those things that you did, what did those techniques reveal?
During the course of this investigation, after several interviews with the victim, after reviewing all that evidence, it was determined that Ariel Castro and Ariel Castro alone was the only person involved in this incident. Throughout their captivity, all the victims had been physically restrained in some type of fashion throughout their entire time. They were held by Ariel Castro. They all stated that they were moved around the house and physically restrained. They were deprived of food, bathing, and bathroom facilities.
How were they restrained?
They were all physically restrained by a chain or being locked in a room.
What else did you learn?
All the victims said they were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Ariel Castro, either vaginally, orally, or anally. Once again, all the victims described a pattern of being repeatedly sexually, physically, emotionally assaulted by Ariel Castro during the entire time that they were held captive.
Right. You mentioned that you worked with prosecutors during the investigation and indictment of this case, correct?
That's correct.
You're aware now that your investigation resulted in some 977 counts being indicted against Mr. Castro?
That's correct.
And am I correct in saying that some of those counts reflect specific instances of conduct which were related to you, and other counts are more general, cover a general timeline?
That's correct.
Can you please describe that and how you arrived at that?
Yes, these charges some of them reflect specific instances of assault that were reported to me by the victims or through the investigation of various written materials.
So any specific count in the indictment reflects a count of sexual assault that was related to you by a victim or you found through your investigation?
That's correct.
Now, the more general counts, how were those arrived at?
When we could not determine a specific instance of physical and sexual assault, we determined that these assaults occurred more often than monthly during the period of activity based on the victim statements. So we sought an indictment for one count of sexual assault per month per victim for the period of captivity. Through my investigation, I again learned that the abuse was continuous and without interruption during the time they were held captive.
All right, now you mentioned that you had reviewed written materials that were kept by the victim during their period of captivity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Those might more generally be referred to as diaries or journals?
That's correct.
Thank you very much, Detective. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, an opportunity to ask a couple questions.
Your Honor, I would note that the plea contract stipulates that all of our evidence is stipulated to by the defense, and that they waive all hearsay. However, we have no objection to any inquiry.
The answer is yes. Thanks, Detective.
Hi, Detective. We've had many opportunities to talk about this case, and in fact, you saw me over the FBI reviewing evidence, the same sort of evidence that you reviewed, which would include the diaries and reviewing the hours of interviews of these young women. And so, one of the things that I want to point out is that despite the obvious nature of the sexual assaults and the kidnaps and the use of chains and restraints, a couple of things, though, that I want to understand and see if you concur with me, in that as it deals with Michelle, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the information that was provided during the course of multiple interviews with law enforcement, that it appears as if any pregnancy that she believed that she had may have simply just been first trimester pregnancies. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And further, any pregnancy that she may have had in first trimester, the question was asked of Amanda, who was in that house for 10 years, as to whether or not she saw and noticed that Michelle was pregnant. That question was asked of Amanda, correct?
Correct.
Judge.
Go ahead.
And ultimately, Amanda conveyed that she had no idea that Michelle was pregnant, didn't she?
That's correct.
And at some point during the discussions with Amanda about the relationship that she had with Mr. Castro, and when she believed that she was pregnant with Jocelyn, she did inform law enforcement that despite the circumstances of being kidnapped, held hostage, and any sort of Stockholm syndrome that may have been in effect, she did use the words, I believe, that I heard them, that it was consensual. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I inquire?
I don't think it's necessary. Here, the parties entered into a plea agreement. And as Mr. Weintraub has just demonstrated, they are fully aware of all the facts and the possibilities at trial, as was the state. And the state entered into a plea bargain understanding that they may or may not have been able to sustain all of their charges. And for new charges that might be brought, specifically capital charges, the defense is aware of all this information, and they thought it was more prudent on behalf of their client to enter into a plea bargain which avoided that. So each side had full knowledge, as I understand it, and entered into an agreement to resolve this matter and to recommend to the court a particular sentence. So,
We'll withdraw the question.
Thank you.
you.